Hi there. Well, today I crossed the Rubicon. It was a big day for me. I was feeling pretty emotional about it. Wasn't really sure what I was going to talk about this morning, but I had a feeling I had something to say, but I hadn't articulated it. So let me just cut to the chase, because I don't like big build-ups. I am pro-life now. Since I'm now 66 years old, since I was 17, I've been pro-choice. Out of respect for my conservative audience here, and for many conservatives that I know, I didn't really talk about it, but I was pretty much pro-choice, although over time, I could feel a growing dis-ease, but I thought, well, if you catch it really early, I'm pro-choice. But I'm not anymore. So this is kind of a walk-away video, and I'll be talking about the news of the week as well, because for me, it all fits together. Interesting, I'm hearing helicopters and things like that. I wonder if that has to do with protests. I wasn't hearing them earlier, but it's 5:30 p.m. Los Angeles time, and I'm hearing them right now. But it's been my experience that internal changes to oneself happen slowly. And there's both conscious and unconscious reckonings going on. And what happened to me was, as many of you know, a couple months ago, I watched a documentary on Amazon Prime. And by the way, I really like Amazon Prime. There are a lot of conservative-oriented documentaries on that, which you can't get on Netflix, which I've canceled. Netflix is completely leftist. But Amazon Prime has lots and lots of good programs on it. I mean, it's kind of shocking, but it's very gratifying. But anyway, I thought, I want to learn more about the demographic effects of the China one-child policy. So there was a documentary about China's one-child policy. And when I watched that, it was horrific. Because what I had heard as somebody who reads a paper, whatever, former Democrat, was that the one-child policy, the kind of awful thing about it was that there was forced sterilizations, maybe some early abortions, but I didn't really know how truly, truly awful it was. And it was awful because it was basically, they didn't know women were pregnant until they're nearly full term. So they would take these pregnant women who were almost ready to give birth and literally force an abortion and kill the baby. And it was so horrific to watch, not just from the horrific killing of the baby, which was bad enough. I mean, that is horrible. But it was soul killing to the woman, to the person doing it. I mean, the things that people had to go through. I suddenly saw the Chinese Communist Party as truly, truly an evil society. Because it was denying at the most basic biological level who we are as human beings. So today, I follow these unconscious instincts that I get. I suddenly thought, I want to watch, again on Amazon Prime, the movie Unplanned. I highly, highly recommend it. And it was in the watching of that movie that I realized we're also doing that to the young women or women who we talk into or we encourage, or in any way, shape that we do it, the same soul-killing, sick culture that condones doing something that is so contrary to who we are as human beings. So what made me watch Unplanned today of all days? Clearly, somewhere inside of me, or inside of myself, I was ready for this. As many of you know, I was a former very active Democrat who walked away from the Democratic Party after many, many years of looking into the so-called science behind climate alarmism. You know, because at first I thought it was a thing. You know, global warming, what can we do? Let's use your nuclear power. Let's do this. Let's do that. I have a whole video on that if you want to watch it. But the bottom line was I suddenly realized, oh my God, what we're reading in the science is so flawed. It was a shock because I love the scientific method. I love science. You have to realize I have voted for every Democratic presidential nominee since I first voted in 1972 for George McGovern. 1972 was the year I turned 18, and they just lowered the voting age from 21 to 18. So once I decided, I don't know if you can hear those helicopters overhead. It's kind of loud, but there they are. I decided to vote for a Republican for the first time in 2016. So the reason I'm talking about all this is because people don't completely change overnight. You got to give them time. Because once I open the door to that, for example, I got on all these different mailing lists of different studies that were coming out, and I saw what happened to anybody who questioned the narrative. And I saw that it was more of a political narrative. And I didn't like what I saw about how if you questioned it, instead of attacking your argument, it was name-calling, you're a climate denier, you're funded by the fossil fuel industry, which nobody's funded by the fossil fuel industry. Sorry, most people do all this on their own dime. But it opened the door. You got to hear that plane or that helicopter. It opened the door for me to becoming a conservative in a lot of other areas. I mean, there were other ways where I've always wanted a strong America. I've always believed in law and order and the police. There were some ways I've always kind of been a conservative, very much for business, for innovation, for the U.S. But I had, tinges of globalism and things like that. But now, and I think it's because the reason I'm ready for this now, or I crossed this Rubicon, because it was growing. I didn't even want to talk about that I was pro-choice. Like Dave Rubin, he says, well, I'm pro-choice, but I talk to people who aren't pro-choice. Because I think I was already starting to have problems with it. But it's increasingly seeing more and more that many, many people on the left, and I won't say all of them, okay, because my stepson, Robert, is a Democrat, and he's fine. My husband, Harold, was kind of a Democrat. He liked to think of himself as independent, but he was pretty much a Democrat. They have beautiful hearts, both of them. Harold also. I mean, just very kind people and happy people. But most people, or many people on the left, they're not emotionally healthy. Even in my own case, I had issues that I spent a lot of time working on. And I have it all documented in my journals. And it's kind of a shock to read through things I struggled with and the work that I did, the internal work. It was extraordinarily hard. And it doesn't happen overnight. But the interesting thing is, the more I healed, the more conservative I became. So at least in this one anecdotal evidence of this one anecdotal situation, my healing took me away from the left. Although I don't even know if I want to say that was completely on the left. I'm trying not to get distracted by all this noise that just started up. But I will talk about that in just a minute. Okay, so one more thing on the whole pro-choice issue. It was really revealing for me watching that unplanned movie, which was, like I said, really, really good. Is I saw similarities with what I also saw in the China situation. Even though these women were not forced, they were talked into it in many cases. They had to stifle their natural feelings about being pregnant and having the baby. And frankly, someone who can just have an abortion and not have strong feelings about it, it's not, you know, you try to rationalize it away. But I really do believe strongly that a normal, healthy woman who gets pregnant is biologically wired to want to do everything she can to nurture and care for her baby. And a healthy man who's part of that equation feels the same way. When we subvert that, it's soul-killing, anti-human, just like the Chinese Communist Party. Is it any surprise that so many on the left like the Chinese Communist Party? They gravitate toward that model. Why do you think that is? Because it's everything antithetical to being human. And I see that in so many different things. There's the incredible, I'm jumping ahead. I actually took notes for this one. In the things that are supported and the fears that they have, the anxiety that I see on the left, even the fears about this. They're so easy to scare about this coronavirus. I mean, they're really frightened, many of them. Oh my God, I step outside without a mask, somebody gets close to me, I'm gonna get the virus. It subverts everything. They can't even look at the numbers. I talked to one person, my brother Doug. He said my brother Doug is an aviation artist. He said a guy a little bit younger than he is, my brother's 4 years younger than I am. He said he knew somebody who died, and he heard of 2 other people who died of the coronavirus. I wonder, did they get hydroxychloroquine? By the way, holy moly, and I've talked about this many times, so I won't talk about it too much right at this moment. There's a lot of good videos out there. But this push against a treatment that works, literally works for so many doctors. They give it to their patient, 12 hours later they feel better. What the heck is going on with that? So I just before I got on, I checked Twitter, because that's sort of how, that's like my news feed. And Laura Ingraham had tweeted out a link to an article that the Lancet issues correction on study that led WHO, the World Health Organization, to pause the hydroxychloroquine trial. And it was that large observational study, and I'm quite sure it's the one I talked about last week. But more than 100 scientists and medical professionals raised questions about the integrity of the data analyzed in the study. Well, I am really glad to hear that, because we really need the medical community to stand up. And they are. I mean, they're disgusted by what's going on politically. There's many different videos out there of medical doctors. I seem to have found many of them. And they're all talking about, what are they talking about? But it's hard for them to prescribe it for their patients in some cases now. It's become so political. But anyway, that study in the Lancet, it was just an observational study. And they didn't release how they got the data. In fact, they used the wrong data. It said the open letter lists 10 major concerns about statistical analysis and data integrity. In other words, this was just a terrible study. It was a terrible study. And in my mind, it was done to promote a political agenda, because the Lancet had just come out with an editorial, Trump is terrible. So they're trying to prove he's terrible. They will kill people. That's what I mean, anti-human. What the heck is going on here, people? What the heck is going on? This is a party. I mean, they don't want to have kids because of climate change. They're so anxious, a lot of these young people. They don't have they're changing their gender surgery. I mean, kids. What the heck is going on? This should never happen to kids. This transgender stuff is nuts. I mean, if an adult wants to do something weird, well, you're an adult. But on children? Wow. Okay, that's just terrible. Okay. So, helicopters are temporarily gone. So let's talk about some of the things that have been happening this week. One of the things that seems very clear to me, I mean, there is a lot of good stuff happening. It seems bad, but it's really good. And I'll tell you why I say that. Because we're seeing it. Like, even as I finally had to turn off the television last night because of just seeing all the things going on with the riots. You know, it affects my sleep if I watch that too much. But I looked a little more carefully. And I thought, you know, the TV cameras make it look bigger than it is. And there are a lot of people who don't support this, don't support the riots. They don't mind the protests. And here's one that blew me away. And Denny Camillo, who we like each other's tweets a lot on Twitter, he actually, I saw that he tweeted this. So you can find this clip because it was from last night's Sean Hannity. But I was really struck by something. Now, Laura Ingraham doesn't do it as much anymore, especially since this coronavirus started, but she used to always have like a leftist on and then someone on our side on, and then they would argue. And I didn't really like that. I still don't like that because I just have a hard time listening to some of the just leftist talking points. So she used to have this guy named a Democrat civil rights attorney, Leo Terrell. And it got to where I just couldn't stand to look at the guy's face, because everything he said, everything was, well, you can imagine. He never said anything I liked, ever. So I learned to just fast forward through him. But Sean Hannity had him on last night. Now, one of the things I like about Sean Hannity and Laura Ingraham now and Tucker Carlson now is they generally don't, Sean Hannity usually does not put a leftist on, because I just, enough already. I mean, I have to fast forward. I don't even watch The Five that much anymore, but Juan Williams, you know, I fast forward through that. But he was on Sean Hannity. So in response to the riots, this is what he said. Now remember, this is a guy who I have never heard a conservative-leaning word out of his mouth for the past several years. I mean, he was like as leftist, reflexively leftist as you could be. So I wrote it down. Sean Hannity, I've listened to your monologue for the last 30 minutes. I want every Fox viewer to know that I agree with everything you've just said. This is a tragedy. There is universal acceptance that the murder of George Floyd was wrong. We agree with that. I am disappointed, shocked that there has been no Democratic lawmaker in the past 72 hours who have focused on the criminal activities of these individuals who are not protesting, they are criminals. And they are breaking the law using the guise of caring about George Floyd. It's not happening, and I encourage all you Democratic lawmakers, all you lawmakers, to stand up and criticize these criminals. I have tremendous credibility as a civil rights attorney. I agree with Sean Hannity. I thank the president for prompt action in getting the attorney general involved in this and the county district attorney for filing charges. But what cannot happen is this Democrat silence. And let me just tell the truth. Why? Because these Democratic lawmakers do not want to alienate black voters. I got news for you. You are alienating me. I'm a black voter. And you have lost me if you don't stand up and do something about these criminals. Well, Leo Terrell, I'm not fast forwarding with you anymore. There you have it. People want law and order. It's really that simple. Black voters, too, want law and order. We all want law and order. A horrible third-degree murder occurred with one bad cop. I don't really know what those other cops are doing or if they're involved, but for sure, that one bad cop. Nobody, literally nobody thinks that was right. We saw on videotape a murder, okay? It was terrible. It was a bad apple and a bad man that let that happen. So why are we rioting? This is not systemic racism. Nobody, that's not what they're writing about. This isn't something that's happening. This is something everybody, everywhere condemns. I mean, there's been a lot of progress. You have to understand that. It's because it's so rare when we see something like that. It's rare. I also, I liked what Rudy Giuliani, the former mayor of New York City, and you know, he really cleaned that city up. And his former police chief, Bernard Kerik, Kerik. By the way, I follow him on Twitter because he's got great tweets. I really like the kind of things that he says. But they basically said, and I'm not quoting exactly, but what you do is people are peacefully protesting, fine. But as soon as the first act of violence happens, like the first rock gets thrown, first thing gets attacked, you arrest that person. And then you arrest the next one that does it. And usually by the time you get the third person arrested who's done something violent, it calms down. So they didn't have these kind of violent protests. You notice we don't have to have these kind of breakdowns in our cities. And notice that these cities are all run by Democrat mayors. Okay? We don't have to do this. We know how to stop this sort of thing. We know how to stop it. Doesn't have to happen. So all this like, oh, By the way, our president is really, really, really good. Really good. Because one of the things, and I saw this when I worked in Washington, when I worked at the Pentagon, you get better at understanding how Washington works. You notice with the president, he's slowly, well, it's not that slow, but he's got a really good team, and his team keeps improving, and they're slowly getting rid of the bad apples, the Obama hangovers. I mean, ideally that would have been done right away, but it takes a while to get the lay of the land and to really understand how you work the system. So as good as Trump is now, he is going to be dynamite in cleaning up the deep state, in making a lot of good changes for the rest of this term and for his next term. Okay, let me say something about what I noticed about the crowds. I was just looking at them. There were actually, in my mind, when I saw, because the cameras are there were actually relatively few, at least from my eyes, agitators. And these should have been immediately arrested for any looting, violence, and arson. But many of them were kind of pasty looking, soy latte, liberal types. And I kind of felt sorry for them. It looked like, well, first of all, maybe they're just glad to be out of quarantine. But they look like they crave some sort of meaning in their life. Like, as a white woman, young woman, okay? Interesting that they're all kind of out of shape. They all look pasty and teeny bit chubby and like they don't exercise. But I'm fighting racism. Okay, now I'm not talking about the ones that are part of Antifa and are busting. I'm just talking about the ones that go down there and think that I'm part of this important cause. Okay, I'm fighting racism. It's really kind of sad. They're so anxious. They're so, their little phones. Like, what are you doing there? Okay? They don't have a life. They don't have a real life. They've just been fed this BS from school, from whatever. That racism is out there. I mean, if you go to college, racism is a problem in this society. It's endemic in this society. I know, because I hear about people who talk, it's like, what? Like, we're living a rape culture. I'm like, are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? I grew up in the 70s, before AIDS, people. If there was going to be a rape culture, it would have been then. And I survived. So this wasn't about any kind of systemic racism. And everyone condemns it. And justice will be served. I just saw that Attorney General Barr, they are going after the people across the state lines, the Antifa groups, because, boy, they are taking advantage of this. They're causing it. They're the ones that are causing these riots. So you're going to win anybody to your side with that? I don't think so. I just saw that the 101 freeway is blocked. It's like, seriously? Oh boy, I so agree. You know, there's more people can be voting Republican. Okay. Okay. I have a couple more observations from this week. So apparently, LA Mayor Eric Garcetti. Oh, and he just gave a pathetic thing about the protests. Okay, but let's forget. Just statement. So pathetic, so weak. But he said that face masks are required outdoors. I mean, I heard this on Tucker Carlson. And I'd been wondering, because when I went to the Palisades Park to do my run, you know, they had one of those things like you have on roads where it's got wheels on it, and it was flashing lights, and it said something like masks are required. And I thought, are they talking about the beach? Because I know they have some stupid rule about the beach, which is nobody's following, and police aren't doing it, but they can't be in the park. But apparently, we are supposed to wear masks outdoors. But let me tell you, nobody's paying attention to that here. Nobody's paying attention. I would say when I go outside to exercise, there's a third to a half of the people who wear a mask outdoors. And they seem pretty pathetic to me. And most of them just kind of let it slip down. But it's a rule that nobody's enforcing. It's not a big deal. And I do make it a point to smile and say something friendly when I pass someone. And most people smile back. But I think around Wednesday, I had one encounter that I did not like. The more I think about it, the more I see that the woman I interacted with, she was just freaked out. She was overly stressed. So one of the things I do is I never move aside, you know, with the distancing when I pass somebody. I mean, they can see me coming. If they want to move, they move. That's my little protest. So this woman, she was on her phone, she had her mask. She had two cute little girls that were like dressed in princess costumes at the park. I don't know, maybe they were going to a party. I don't know. Well, I guess they wouldn't be going to a party, but whatever. So there was like a bush, and I'm just walking, and she, stay away, or whatever. And I said, and so I argued. I said, oh, stop. You worried about a virus? That's just like, don't spread fear to your children, you know. That's why I argued with her. And as I was passing, she goes, well, you don't have kids. And I thought, how does she know I don't have kids? I mean, but I didn't like that interaction. I got to think of something different. Because this woman she was not happy. She was afraid. She was truly afraid. She wasn't really being a busybody. She was being freaked out that I got so close to her. So I won't do that again. And by the way, she reminded me of that woman in the Central Park who lost her dog, her job. I mean, that was awful what was done to her. I could tell she was just so stressed out. And rightly so, some guy's harassing her. And she's alone in a park. I mean, where did we get to where women aren't supposed to be afraid for their own safety? I mean, they made it into a racism thing. I liked Michael Knowles. He had a thing. He called it the Two Karens. He had a little episode on that. And I really liked what he had to say, which is that they both were in the wrong, but the guy was creepy. That was just creepy. And I talked about it with Robert, my stepson, and he was horrified. He says, you could just see she's all stressed out. You could see, and they took her dog away. She lost her job. You know, to him, it was like just rude. I mean, and then the guy posted it and it just went viral. I mean, we become anti-women too. I mean, it's scary if a woman is in a park and there's nobody else around and a guy's filming you, harassing you, threatening you, which he was. anyway, she also, I mean, I knew right away she was a liberal, a lefty, because of the way she was so anxious. I feel bad for her. It was, I hope she recovers okay, because that was just an awful, ugly, leftist Twitter mob. And, okay, here's another thing. Because I haven't heard this anywhere. But I was talking to my niece Jenna, and she goes, huh, I never thought of that. So she thought it was interesting. Thank you, Jenna. So I will tell you. And this is about Joe Biden's "You ain't black" comment. One of the things I have not heard mentioned, but what I found offensive about it, what do you think that is? Why did he use the word "ain't"? Is that how he thinks black people talk? That to me was offensive. Like, I'm talking to the black community. You ain't black. Ain't? I mean, that's not my picture of black people, for sure. Damn. The ones I know are all beautifully articulate. I mean, I've always struggled to articulate well. And they're, well, I shouldn't speak in generalities, but, well, I guess I've analyzed, okay, what are my thoughts about black people? Like, what are my unconscious thoughts? They speak very well, okay? That's why, like, the black conservatives, they're, the language, how do rappers think of that stuff? Most rappers are blacks. I mean, it's like, you gotta be fast to be able to do that. And I've always admired that. But also, I find that black men are gentlemen. They're always so kind, they're always so gentlemanly like. That's always been my experience. It's not always my experience with white men, but it's always been my experience. It's kind of like, I don't guess, meeting Southern men. I suppose I would think that they're always gentlemanly like. But every black man I come across, I was talking to a conservative man about this some time ago, and he goes, yeah, you know, I can always kind of like say something friendly to, if I'm passing a black guy, and they always like, you know, say something friendly back. But I won't always do that with a white guy. I mean, they're always nice. So that's my unconscious bias for blacks, and that just because that's been my experience. I'm 66 years old, people. That's been my experience. But to say you ain't black, wow. Okay, there's just so much. I love what the president is doing about social media giants. I've tweeted about it, but that's another thing. They can't do this to conservatives. And even though we're bothered about what the social media companies are doing with conservatives, look, we have ways to communicate, like me doing this video. It is wonderful today how we can communicate. When I was younger, the only thing I could do was write a letter to the editor and hopefully get it published in the newspaper. And I started doing that when I was in high school. I would write letters to the Fresno Bee. Go to church and people say, oh, you're the one that, I like your letters. You know, they were on various issues, but I've always been one to get my opinion out there. But anyway, Twitter was just stupid to take on the president because he's going to do something. And that's starting the ball rolling, where everybody's really looking at what they are doing. Okay? I mean, the idiocy of that was just kind of funny. So, one of the things I really want to emphasize, because I see this sometimes, is that people get mad at a particular Republican because they're doing this or that. Now, We need to hold Republicans' feet to the fire, for sure. But we still need to vote for them. Don't forget that. Don't think that you have to have perfection. Don't step back. Because if you do that, the Democrats will vote. The Democrats will win. So it doesn't work that way, people. You've got to deal with political realities. So if you don't like something that your Republican isn't doing, let them know. Absolutely let them know. Okay? And we got to fight these rhinos. But I notice it works. Like, except for Mitt Romney. He's kind of a lost cause. But you still need to vote. If there's nobody else, if it's a rhino versus a Democrat, hold your nose and vote for the rhino. Because numbers matter. For example, in the House, we've got to get a majority. We get a majority on paper, even if they're terrible Republicans, even if they were rhino Republicans, then we have the majority, okay? So it means the Republicans are head of all the committees. We don't have to deal with Adam Schiff anymore, okay? It'd be Devin Nunes on that House Intelligence Committee. We won't have all this nonsense. So don't be a perfectionist, okay? To win this war, we need the numbers. We need the majorities. And remember, the Republican Party is changing. Trump is changing. People are learning to fight back the way he fights back. We see this across the board. He's getting better and better people in place. We will win this, and we have to win this. We have to. It's for the soul of this nation, and we will. We will. There's much, much to be hopeful for. Okay? And today's been a very special day for me. And don't lose hope for some people. You can kind of tell. There's the really hateful, messed up people. Don't bother with them. But what about people like me, like the way I was? I was reachable. My sweet niece, Lindsay, had a big, big influence on me. She always loved me. But she stuck to her beliefs. Made a big, big impact. And then there's Jenna, and there's Julie. They all have conservative Christian beliefs. And they've always loved me. And it does. And my sister Denise, we went to 5 kids. She has lived her life the way she wanted to live it. And it was hard. It was hard for her. Because when she wanted to get married and have children, and be a mother to her children, and stay home with them, there was a lot of pressure to do otherwise. I so admire her for what she's done. So Denise, you've had an effect too. And another thing that movie Unplanned showed, there were 2 pro-lifers that would kind of demonstrate nicely outside the clinic, where this woman was the director of the Planned Parenthood clinic, the protagonist. But they were always nice to her, and they would talk to her. And you know, had an impact. And now they're all very good friends. So I think it's important to be firm in your own beliefs, but always try to be kind. Just arguing with someone, trying to convince them with logic, doesn't work. Try to be kind. I know I'm trying to be kind. I don't always manage it because sometimes I get angry, but if I could change, and these are huge changes, but I have so much more peace in my heart and so much more happiness than I've ever had in my life. I want to thank all of you Okay, starting to feel emotional here. I'll stop with that and talk with you next week.